The views expressed on the Final Straw Radio do not necessarily reflect those of Asheville FM, Friends of Community Radio, or any of the affiliate radio stations airing the show. From the studios of Asheville FM 103.3 FM in Asheville, North Carolina, this is The Final Straw, and I'm William Goodenough. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions or suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. Also, if you're interested in rebroadcasting any episode or segment of any show, you're free to do so. Just if you do, send us an email. If you care to, you can send us letters at The Final Straw, care of Asheville FM, 864 Haywood Road, Asheville, North Carolina, 28806. This show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a sample of Firestorm's catalog of books and zines, plus a full calendar of events at their website, firestorm.coop. This week we are presenting two anarchist voices regarding DACA. Among many other things, DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals and has been in the news recently because of a stay on this program by the current administration. I should say that these two interviews were conducted separately, and I am trying something different regarding their presentation, namely weaving the two of them together in a way that seemed to make the most sense to me, so as to present all the information in the most succinct way all at the same time and in the same place, while still trying to preserve the arcs of both interviews. I'm still not really sure how I feel about this radio tactic, and I'm seeking opinions from listeners if you feel moved to shoot me an email via the radio show's Rise Up account. The two interviews were very different and from slightly different perspectives, though the two interviewees were both anarchists and both living in North Carolina. We talk about DACA and its histories, some psychological and logistical impacts of the stay on affected communities, and the mental calisthenics involved in being an anarchist while living in a world so saturated by the state and all it entails. If you enjoyed this presentation, both of the interviews in their entirety, including my replies and questions, are on the Final Straw Radio's archive.org collection for anyone to listen to. Just visit archive.org and search the Final Straw Radio collection and navigate to the post entitled DACA Interviews Full Versions. Right now you are listening to Soledad Bravo with Punto y Raya. Came out in 1974 and was recommended to us by Sam, one of the interviewees.
I go by Sam, and I actually just started working again, most of the time with my son. He's about to be 2 years old, but So I'm mostly, at home, working at home, taking care of my family, my boyfriend, and, just start working at this school. And I also do some art and stuff when I have time. So DACA is a program that was launched, I think, 2012, and the purpose of it is to help, in some type of way, young, undocumented people. And there are restrictions, like if you could apply to DACA if you arrive to the United States before your 16th, your 17th birthday, and like not having like like problems with the police, or like have like a criminal record. It's very restrictive, but a lot of young people undocumented people have been able to benefit from it. It was passed during Obama's administration, and it gives us the opportunity to have a driving license. In some states, you can go to college. The state where I live, I cannot go to college, to pay in-state. I have to pay out-of-state still. So it's different for every state. The main thing is that we have a work permit. We can work legally. And in some occasions, we can leave the country, visit our home countries under emergency circumstances, and we can come back. So that's basically what DACA is. Months ago, the Trump administration, or Trump, said, that since the beginning of his whatever presidency, he said he was going to get rid of DACA. And, well, I guess people are really trying to get rid of it, or like people in the government are really trying to get rid of it. I think on September 6th this year, they decided that they were going to end the program. And a lot of people were not going to be able to renew their documentation. I was able to renew my documentation for another 2 years, so I'm pretty lucky. But like a lot of people are probably losing their jobs. I don't know anyone personally, but I know that there's people that are really like losing their jobs, just upset, and at some point afraid that, they might get deported because their permit is going to expire really soon. And, I know that maybe some people might have a risk of losing their cars, or because people were able to have like a steady income, and some people were, buying cars and, just being able to afford things. And now that they're losing their job, they're losing, their stuff. Also with school, a lot of people were going to college and stuff, and now it's going to be really difficult for them to finish. So those are some of the few things that come to my mind.
My name is Jose Angel Romero, and I'm talking to you from my kitchen, actually. So if you hear a dishwasher, I apologize, but there's plenty of dirty dishes to spill some tea about. So I hope that talking from the hearth can be some kind of unsettling of the legacies of brown people in the kitchen. And I am currently a Durham resident. I moved here from Philadelphia, but I'm originally from the West Coast, and my family is a mix of Mexicans and Salvadorians. So my mom is from Michoacán, Mexico, and my dad is from Morazán, El Salvador. They're both working class folks that moved to the U.S. actually in the 80s during the height of intense CIA counterinsurgency programs across Mesoamerica. And they actually moved to the U.S. to clean up ash from Mount St. Helens. So I think that also explains maybe why our household was pretty explosive growing up. So I'm very grateful to have been able to do this with my comrade, and I know that she is more directly affected by some of the policies around DACA. And so I'm not documented, just upfront about that. But the history around what deferred action for childhood arrivals is that there's been organizing around immigrant rights since at least the 80s when the sanctuary movement started, but DACA emerged really in the wake of the mass mobilizations in 2006, where documented and undocumented folks, and right, these are phrases that I kind of want to trouble a bit, took to the streets in the thousands, marched on Washington, left schools, and were trying to confront, really, at the time, then President George W. Bush's creation of the Department of Homeland Security and how it was affecting brown and black folks here in the U.S. And so DACA, as a part of those protests, as a way of kind of finding a way to get a grip on things, Congress wound up buying into this narrative that has circulated for a while around there are different types of immigrants. Some of them are good and some of them are purportedly bad. And DACA wound up emerging in this very fraught encounter with folks really expressing the need for any kind of help from the government, or demanding that the government stop violating their rights as people who exist. So DACA wound up being a way for folks who had come into the United States prior to the age of 18 and being able to apply for a stay. So this wasn't necessarily a pathway to citizenship. It just meant that you wouldn't get deported. And it's important to emphasize that there's a difference there, because as important as DACA is and as fucked up as all of the legislation that is happening right now trying to undo it, it was not exactly a pathway to citizenship. Now, in terms of thinking about what this means also for Black, brown, working class organizing and, Antifa and anarchist organizing, I've been very struck by the fact that the cutoff date by which you had to have been born on or after this date to be able to receive DACA is June 15th, 1981. Well, being the uncanny person that I am, what else happened on June 15th, 1981? Well, this was also the day that the Supreme Court decided that prison cells that were designed for one person or two people could actually hold double the size of that. So if it was a prison cell that could hold two people, the Supreme Court decided that it could now hold four. And so I think it's important to think about how the wider political context shaping some of these things, but it just kind of blows my mind that, right, at the cutoff date for when folks can purportedly consider themselves documented is the same day that the violence of mass incarceration is also intensifying.
A lot of people, I see my family, my mom, uncles, aunts, older cousins that weren't able to apply because they got here 1 year, like at 17, or like older people or parents, that have been working so hard the whole time, and then we are the ones that are giving a chance. It's like it hurts. Our parents are the ones that are truly, really exploited, and they get nothing, and somehow they want to give us these crumbs that do help us, but they forget about who, like they say, we're going to give the kids of those people that they brought them when they were very young against their will. They're making them sound like they are like all these bad people, when in fact, like, they're some fucking heroes because they're doing the best they can to give us the best they can, and they are exploited, and they want to make them look like they're criminals and whatever. For me, it's kind of like heartbreaking, because our parents, in whichever condition, whether they did something in their countries or not, we should be able to move wherever we need to, because it's not that we just want to move here because, we just want to go and see the U.S. Like, no, things are pushing us out of our places, So, yeah, all these people that are not being considered, it just shows you how shitty the U.S. is. But still, they do make money from all of them, all of us. So I think we definitely should push for like something bigger than DACA. Amnesty will be, to me, great, but we should push for something that applies for everyone. Sometimes people in the community, even in the Latino community, they will be like, well, how are these men driving drunk and causing all these accidents? And yeah, these people should be deported. But I'm like, all right, you have all these white people doing fucked up shit, and what? They should be deported too. I don't care. Like, they have 2 generations, 3 generations here. It's just like this chain. People don't think about why are people getting drunk? Why are people doing these things? So they just say, oh yeah, these are criminals or whatever. So I definitely think that we should really not throw each other under the bus, point fingers at who hasn't done what and who has done what. And, yeah, a lot of these people, a lot of my family members and friends are not even being like included in these kind of conversations. So that's very annoying and frustrating.
But, DACA is really important. And I think DACA is also like a figure for just immigrant struggles across the country. And really the racist attacks on it are about DACA, but are also just about, trying to continue to find ways of oppressing Black, brown, and working class folks.
So I know that DACA was given by the government, but it was the work of young undocumented people and allies or accomplices that actually made it happen by staying in the offices of officials. So DACA happened because young people were pushing really hard. And Obama was just like, oh, so here's DACA, I want to help you out, but I just deported your dad, So yeah, I think that to me, it's complicated because I know that we shouldn't rely on the government, and there's ways to, for communities to work with each other and do things. But I feel like if a cop stops me and I don't have a license and my community is not right there, it does help me to have a license. I understand from that like anarchist perspective because I feel it and I fight with these feelings of we should not like depend or like, I don't know, like fuck DACA, I want to say fuck DACA, fuck having a social, like everyone born your social security, born your birth certificate, everyone, So I want to be like, yeah, fuck all these things and let's just not depend on this place and let's work something out. But then you see your family and you're like, well, I do have to feed this kid, and I do have to help like my mom and shit's hard. So I need to get a job. And having papers gives you chances to get paid a little bit better, being able to get other kinds of jobs.
I also want to respond to this idea that the people that we refer to as undocumented are a drain on local resources. And in fact, there are numerous, the National Economic Institute has put out policy briefs around the millions and millions of dollars that undocumented folks put into the economy that they don't get a return on precisely because they are undocumented and thus don't have that pathway to receive those funds back.
I would be really annoyed because even before, like previous to DACA, working since I was very young, I was like, okay, so I know that I'm paying taxes even though I don't have DACA, social. And also after actually being able to have a work permit and not being able to go to school, that was one of the things that really bothered me. Like, I'm paying for all these public things, but I can't go to college. I know that they don't make sense, they suck and everything, but I'm like, at least let me go to school, But yeah, every state is different. I hear that in California, kids can go and they even have financial aid, and I think that's great.
But in North Carolina, you can't go to school.
Right now, in North Carolina, you can go. I mean, there's ways to go, but they're kind of tricky. Someone has to sponsor you. Like the place where you work has to sponsor you. Sometimes it's hard for a place to sponsor you. Sometimes they don't want to. So it's tricky.
Undocumented folks, really, they're everywhere. They're every day. This isn't an exceptional group of people, and it shapes, and folks that we would call undocumented, we're putting the food on your table, we're building your houses, all of the infrastructure is entangled with these folks. And so how would a stay like this really impact people's lives? Well, it would in fact impact it quite dramatically. I don't want to underestimate that, and I think we're going to continue to see how some of those things are going to unfold. But, just last week, I had a high school student come up to me and ask me, what am I supposed to do? Like, I think I'm going to have to move to Canada because I am afraid to leave the house. And I think many folks have seen, those articles around Arizona where hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of students just stopped going to school, and the school system had to shut down because there weren't students that were coming. And stuff like this is going to continue to happen. So it's both material as well as psychological forms of violence that are at play with how this program would impact people's lives. And a lot of this might also come out in the long term. I mean, here in North Carolina, no one was picking watermelon. And so there was just massive amounts of watermelon that had to get thrown and lost because folks weren't able to go and work because they feared for their lives. And it's quite insidious. It's quite strong what folks are up against. Although I also want to say that one of the more insidious elements around this is that I don't want the horizon to become so presentist that we can no longer believe in a future. And I've been telling folks that, I want to be able to believe in the future again, because what we're up against makes us have to fight this, just take it one day at a time, one day at a time. But, I think this day is going to somewhat force us to, think about how do we shift the conversation from how do we get citizenship to how do we stop people from getting deported? And that's where most of us are at right now. We're not even able to have this other conversation about what kind of government will we want? What kind of other forms of community are possible? Because we're just trying to stop people from getting kidnapped by the state. And that's pretty intense. One group that I work with, Alerta Migratoria, they have dozens of cases constantly coming in that they have to deal with. And it's a bit overwhelming, but I think there's glimmers of hope that I want to be able to hold on to. I've been telling my friends lately that it's somewhat cruelly hilarious that somebody who doesn't believe in climate change uses so many environmental metaphors to describe this country. So, right, he's always there are waves of immigrants, we're being flooded by the brown menace. It's you would think he actually believed in the environment. But that aside, I absolutely agree that Trump is somewhat of a distraction, though that doesn't mean that we don't need to confront him.
I really believe that he doesn't, at first I didn't know, if he knew what he was doing, but, I mean, now I can see that he doesn't really care about someone in specific, because I can see that he was making promises to these people about kicking all, all illegals out because he wanted to provide jobs for Americans. But on the other side, he doesn't really care about, Americans getting, paid well. Or, he doesn't. So, yeah, I can totally see that, he's just definitely gaslighting everyone. A lot of our community members, we're all different, and some of us are very emotional. and some of us might be a little more like strong, like some people get really affected by news like this, even though they might not be like directly affected. Like I'm talking about, young people, kids, knowing that their parents or their older brothers, older siblings that have no papers might be deported. Like I can see in my communities, like especially children feeling really anxious about their families being separated. And also I know that for other communities, like the Muslim ban, like I'm sure that family members or, like the Muslim community is being threatened. And I'm sure like a lot of people are like ready to fight, but other people are probably feeling just like very isolated and, like having so many emotions. So this dude is basically playing with all of us emotions and lives, basically.
In terms of our organizing, I think it's important for us to think about him as very much grounded, very much working in a history. And I'm still very worried about what Mike Pence is going to do whenever I think about like, oh, okay, we're going to impeach Trump. Well, what else is brewing in this office? He's actually been following up on a lot of the things that he did say on his campaign trail. And so we can't underestimate how much power his seemingly absurd words actually carry. But yeah, it is gaslighting in a way, but there's also a local political struggle happening that I don't want to forget. Mississippi, for example, managed to get a really awesome mayor elected. Here in Durham, we have Pierce Freelon, who's like running really on an abolitionist platform. And thinking about how it is that Trump sometimes also winds up making us forget about these local struggles that we're embedded in. And this is like an age-old, dilemma for radical organizing. The scale is either too high or too low. Ultimately, for me, I mean, I don't really care what scale people are working at as long as they're showing up in every way that they can, and knowing that that's going to be different for different folks. But Trump is absolutely working, a white supremacist, cis heteropatriarchal, settler colonial, enslaving, democratic legacy.
So, like he's been talking about like trying to deport people and trying to get rid of DACA, and like before he said that he was gonna get rid of DACA, I was trying to apply and I was in the process of like paying, like gathering this money to pay for the work permit. So it was a struggle for me to gather all this money because I'm not working, because I'm taking care of my kid. It's $495 plus if you do it yourself, that's great. But you don't want to risk it to do it yourself because you might mess up, and then if you mess up, they kick it back and you're done. So people usually invest at least $150 on someone that can help you fill it out. So it's about like maybe $600 to $650 for the whole thing.
That's a lot of money. And you have to renew it every 2 years, right? That's $500 every 2 years or so?
Yeah, every 2 years. And for example, like I was struggling a lot because for some people it's like 500 is not that much, and you have 2 years to raise it. Like, but that's the thing. For example, I was in this position in which I was pregnant and I was working, but then at some point I wasn't able to work anymore. And I don't have health insurance, and I didn't have a job that will pay me for like maternity or that kind of stuff. And I wanted to be with my kid. So I didn't work since a little bit before he was born until probably 2 weeks ago. So I was very worried because whenever you apply for DACA, whenever you renew your DACA, you're supposed to stay at work if you have a work permit, So to me that was scary because I was like, I haven't been working because I am busy with my son. I want to raise him. I want to spend time with him. And I was afraid that they were going to kick my application back because they haven't seen any type of work proof, that haven't been active. Mm-hmm. So to me that was really stressful to think like maybe they're not gonna give me my work permit because they can see that I haven't worked. To me, that's really fucked up. Like, yeah, it's a work permit, but they want you to stay active and keep producing and keep like, you know, they want your taxes, they want all these things. So if you're not like, you know, like an active member working and stuff, it's like you are not worth the paperwork. Yeah, the work permit. You know, I hate that they call it work permit. I know we want to work, but what if something happens to me and I can't work anymore? You know, like, am I disqualified if I ended up having an accident and I can't work anymore? Like, that's just messed up. And then they said, oh, they're going to get rid of DACA. And really, when all this was happening, I was submitting all my paperwork, and I was like, wait, did they just say they're going to, like, get rid of it? And is my money just going to be gone? Because they can get away with it, you know? They can do that. And anyway, so I was just kind of like, what do I do now? Like, will they give me my money back at least? You know, and so after I heard about the news that they were going to let people apply, there was this last day, you know. So I knew that I was probably going to get a chance, but I didn't know what was going to happen. So I was just really stressed and worried because also my boyfriend doesn't also have documents. We were just stressing a lot, and I'm like, you know what? You've been able to work, we've been able to live, you know, without this, like my partner. And I was like, I don't want to hear anything, you know, whatever that comes out, I'll check it out later, but I don't want to read anything else because I'm feeling sick. You know, it's taking over like my body and my mind all the time, and that's not healthy. And that's what they want us to be. They don't want us to be like in peace. They want us to be worried. So I haven't been checking out the news too often, to be honest. From one part, like, I know that maybe I should be checking out the news because I know that I'm going to get a work permit, and my work permit is going to be renewed. And I know that I'm going to be okay for 2 years. But, like, at the same time, they could change things. They could be like, you know what? No, we won't give you anything because we don't want to. I don't know, you know? So I was just too stressed. It was taking too much on my body and mind, and I couldn't deal with it.
Fear is very intense right now. We're working in the wake of what was called the war on terror, which was never really over, and that's a war on an emotion. How are you supposed to have a treaty with terror? And that's apparently what Obama was, and now we're working in the wake of a treaty with terror. And actually thinking about, you know, how embodied and sensory all of this is. Some of this exceeds words, right? Fear, you don't always have a language for, but it's something that really propels you into situations that you sometimes might not be able to anticipate. And for that alone, we kind of need to follow our gut and also challenge our gut, because sometimes our gut can be, you know, if you've been eating lots of like bleached like American food, you're not gonna necessarily have like the same kind of decolonial gut maybe or something, or anti-colonial gut. But I just actually being able to hear and listen to our bodies, I think is very key. And you know, that might mean having to understand that we're gonna improvise and not always share everything with every person, and assuming that we can do that, I think can also, like, as you said, be short-sighted.
I feel like I've seen, you know, younger kids very active, very aware of what's going on. I feel like some years ago, people were a little bit more like not so open. I can see the change on people and how at some point some people were like immigrants, like part of my community. Some people were like, I didn't want to come here. My parents brought me. And then they think about it and they realize how stupid they sound because their parents are doing their best. They are looking out for their kids. And these like people are like thinking on what they said, and you know, like some people do change their views and they're like, okay, I messed up. Yeah, my parents, you know, like, yeah, I was brought here by them and I'm proud of them because they are doing the best for us. And then I see that undocumented people are advocating young people for a right, right? So what I'm trying to say is that I can see that through the years with the Obama administration and now this administration and all the things that are going on in the U.S., I feel like people in the, I guess, Latinx community, a lot of the young people, every day they seem to have like ideas that are like more rad, as like, you need to include our parents. You need to include like my uncle. Yeah, he did this and that, but he should be included, And this is the thing. Older Latinx have this view of the U.S. because the countries that we live in are very corrupted and the police, you cannot trust them. We think that when we move to the U.S., the U.S. works out well because the justice system works. Because there's always like, if something happens, the cops come right away. If there's a robbery, the cops come right away. They find the bad guys or whatever. So a lot of our communities still have that thing in mind, that we need to respect the rules, that we need to obey the rules because this place works because people obey the rules. And I see people like pushing other people, throwing people under the bus, even in our own Latinx communities. But I feel like since Trump's administration, as how like he has been openly racist and letting other people, especially white people, being open about their racism, and I can see how like other Latinos that were kind of more conservative are engaging more into like, well, if the president is being racist, like that's not good, like that's not right. So I can see that they are transforming, their ideas are transforming into less conservative. I can definitely see like our communities, for example, recently working closely with each other, forming groups and helping each other. Like someone got like arrested by cops and they were placed in hold. And they were supporting, and this person had like 3 babies. And there was a call to the community to support this family, and everyone is supporting each other. I can see that in these times, people are doing whatever they can, whether it's like donating money, donating food, donating like their labor to raise money for things, signing petitions, even little stuff like that I think it's undermined sometimes, but it does play a role into changing things, so yeah, I can see our communities like doing work and organizing in different ways, doing the best they can.
As we've been saying, this didn't come out of nowhere, and we saw in January the protests at airports against what was called the Muslim ban, even though it was also a little bit more geographically inflected than just all of Islam. But it is definitely, in terms of how it's shaping the current culture of resistance, I've heard a phrase that I'm not throwing out, and diversity of tactics gets circulated a lot. And I understand what makes people use that phrase, and I completely, most of the time, support the folks that use that phrase. But I think that the conversation around a diversity of tactics requires a shared target. And I'm actually not sure that we all actually are on the same page around who we are confronting. The Democratic Party and the left, I don't think see eye to eye on who it is that we're up against. I think the Democratic Party would very much like to exceptionalize Trump and make him seem, oh, this is just a blip in the road, whereas folks, like anarchists, communists, and other Black, brown, and working class organizers want to be like, no, this is exactly part of what brought the Democratic Party online, white supremacist culture, cis violence, and it's making us think about tactics more than it is about who it is that we're up against. And I still want to have both of those conversations. And it's difficult, but I think it's important to hold on to both of those elements. Right now, it's usually seen as the radical left is interested in punching Nazis, while the Democrats are actually trying to carry out great policies. part of what led to here in Durham, speaking specifically to the toppling of that racist monument, was that the day after Charlottesville, there was a vigil called here in Durham by, a liberal democratic group. And at that vigil, like I was at Charlottesville, and other Black, brown, and working class folks that were actually in Charlottesville or also had been doing work here in the Triangle for a long time tried to speak at this vigil and were threatened with arrest because we were purportedly too angry. And so the next day we had to have our own emergency action. And this is when we were like, no, we can't continue to let the Democratic Party assume that it is the only one that knows what we're up against. And that's also what precipitated some of this toppling of the monument. It's just, I don't think we share the same target. Literally the folks who are supposedly on our side, liberal Democrats that are like, oh yeah, we're against Trump, threatened directly affected folks with arrest. Like that just blows my mind. But that's just where we're at right now. So there's a lot of fracturing, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that people are putting in the work to come together. I think it's been a long time since I've actually seen anarchists and communists working as side by side in this particular moment. But that's another conversation.
At some point, I want to go back to my country and work from there, get some land over there, and being able to connect with people over there. And if you're an ally, maybe you can help someone that is like undocumented buy land in their home countries.
I'm kind of a person that can be annoying in the sense that I really like etymology. And so when it comes to the word anarchy, I'm really held to Anna as like what propels that, because that's what marks anarchy being different than, say, something like monarchy. And Anna is a really powerful prefix, not only because it also can be funny and bring us to like thinking about anal and the need for pleasure, but it also means something that's like both in and out. And Anna as something that exceeds even the division between in and out. And somebody that I've been obsessed with lately, who's this like super awesome, speaking of Puerto Rico, this super awesome like Boricua, a radical anthropologist, her name is Yarimar Bonilla Silva. And she's got this awesome book called Non-Sovereign Futures. And in it, she gives us this really awesome take on Maroons, who are often seen as being folks who were completely devoid of the state when we're thinking about abolitionists or how to confront these like racist settler democratic logics. Folks will often think about the Maroons. They're like, oh, they lived in the swamps and they never interacted with anybody. Well, she offers us actually a different reading that's like archivally grounded, in which even Maroons had to interact with what we might think of as like state forms in order to survive. How did they know which swamps to go to? They were talking to indigenous folks in the regions that they were at, and they would also go and steal food. What might be called stealing, although it shouldn't be called stealing. Reclaiming food from stores held by slave owners, right? And actually those are ways of engaging the state. The only possible relationship to the state today is a criminal one. And actually thinking that we have to actually steal back what was stolen from us is very key. And in that sense, I'm not really willing to cede everything that gets called the state. I don't have like some kind of pure politics around which folks should be prohibited from doing that. That being said, I think there are a lot of different possibilities for what, protests can look like today. Before going into some more specific things here in North Carolina, I will say I spent a lot of my childhood in Michoacan and Mexico. The conversation around policing in the U.S. is very curious because it's like, oh, people will talk about how the police is getting militarized. Well, in a place like Mexico, the horizon isn't the police, it's already the military. There's no citizen, police, and then military. It's just people and then the military that are fighting against each other. And so that shaped the conversation a bit differently. And I have like family members in 2012 that took up arms in what was called the Autodefensa movement, were very much like, we're not interacting with the state, we're forming our own collectives, we have our own security, we have our own defense. And that wound up, I mean, that could be like a whole nother conversation, but and a lot of that wound up bringing up a lot of fucked up sexual and gender dynamics that I think we need to confront in radical organizing spaces that I still haven't really heard that much about. And actually thinking about the need to be able, and even myself today, right? I'm bringing this up after like having talked for so long, that there's just a lot of ways in our everyday life where we have to confront like these like sexual and gender dynamics that give rise to what we're up against. But even within the autodefensa movement, when reporters would come, I remember how folks would like literally pelt them with like tomatoes and beer cans. And thinking of that as like a form of protest, just the unwillingness to be consumed as like a stance is, I think, something very radical. And speaking of your gut, right? Like it's like, oh, I got some racial indigestion. Like not today. Like I will not be the one. I think that can be very powerful for thinking about what an anarchist practice is. And in Mexico, most of the anarchists that I hang out there are vegan, actually, which I am myself, although, veganism is very much a problematic formulation. I prefer plant-based. And I think folks that, consume meat, etc., could be considered vegan or plant-based. I think veganism isn't about what you eat, it's about how you eat. Going into this, I say that because I don't want to lose sight of how the broad range of possibilities that we have before us, because it can seem overwhelming what we're up against. It can seem like, we have no future. It can seem like we have no tactics, but really we persist. We're going to keep dreaming and we're going to keep persisting. And here in North Carolina, what strategies make sense? Well, I think it's actually going to take some folks that haven't been doing this, putting their bodies on the line and literally stopping cars from leaving the police station and going to an immigration detention center. We've done this here in Durham where folks chained themselves to the entrances to the Durham County jailhouse and stopped cars from entering and leaving. I think folks are going to have to also continue to emphasize the ways in which, the purportedly undocumented have been the condition of possibility for all of the wealth that is around us today. And thinking, we can't buy into any kind of like good immigrant, bad immigrant, or good activist, bad activist kind of dichotomy. It's going to take all of these things. And reach out to your local chapter of the Wobblies, like, the General Defense Committee. If you're in North Carolina, reach out to Alerta Migratoria as well. These are folks that are committed to doing this kind of work. In every state, I know that there are folks that are doing this. The Black Lives Matter chapters across the country, or for the movement for Black Lives, asking them, like, how do we get plugged in? And not forgetting that even right now, even though so much of the horizon seems to be about immigrant rights, that even within that space, we have to confront the fundamental anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity that we still have to face. And that's not even the state, right? Like that's within us, within our being, like how it is that we understand the world. Even saying hello, plant some trees. We all need some oxygen. As a kind of breathless person myself, I know I need to take a step back and sometimes just breathe it in and celebrate and enjoy. But I think, supporting groups like Redneck Revolt and similar groups like that are actually just doing that work, the incalculably necessary, somewhat dangerous, but, important and communal work. Yeah, and in terms of a list of tactics, I do feel compelled to say, everybody's got skills. It's, when people are talking about like the armed left, I always like to remix it and be like, well, what's an arm? Well, most of us tend to have some kind of form of an arm. And thinking about like the skills that people actually have is key, and everybody's got those. I mean, you can be a cook, like, and offer food to the folks in your neighborhood. Amiri Baraka, the Black radical poet, what he would do is he would have one day out of the week in which he would just have a communal dinner, and anybody that showed up like just got a free meal. If you participate in religious settings, go to your church and ask them to have a community conversation around sanctuary and whether or not they are willing to offer sanctuary. Also, you can go lobby at your state capitol. I've done that a few times, and as an anarchist, like I was like, why am I here? It was mostly because my friend pulled me there, and not that I think that horizon is deep, but it was good to know. Okay, this is the face of that congressperson who thinks that they are my governor, right? Like this is who that is, and like actually seeing them face to face was key for my anarchist organizing as well. And there are a lot of things there that can happen.
What I think is that if people need to know more about this, they need to get in touch with like their community members. If people Google stuff about DACA, and there's websites, there's organizations that tell you mainly what DACA is, how to help. And right now people are raising a lot of money to help people with their expenses. I wish I had like applied for that, because, they probably have a lot of money for that. And I'm thinking where, like the money that is for that, where is it going to go, But anyway, so if people want to know more, they need to connect with like friends and community members, like where people that people work with, ask if they can help, I can't think of other resources other than your own community. To be honest, like I said, I haven't been checking out like news and stuff, but I know there's good sources out there that explain you what DACA is and more.
In terms of like otherwise than that, yeah, I mean, I tend to be a very like, non-theologically oriented spiritual person. I don't think it's an accident that immigration and customs enforcement spells out the word ICE, because when you become cold-hearted, you start to forget how to interact with the world around you. You get agoraphobia, and then you like never leave your house and whatever, right? And even when you're within your house, like this interview, right, you can have virtual forms of communicating with each other that undo those borders, those material borders in very profound ways. And holding on to that, I think, is very key. As I said already, I would reach out to, the chapters of the industrial workers of the world, of thinking about just looking up in your town what are what get called cultural resource centers, and seeing what kind of resources they offer, pitching others. I know across the South, Southerners on New Ground is a group that I've done work with that's trying to end money bail. And that's a very awesome group of explicitly like queer and trans, black and brown abolitionists that are doing a lot of great work and actually getting folks out of the inside. Letter writing, I think, can never be underestimated, because they can lock up our bodies, but they can't necessarily lock up our souls in the same way. And being able to hold on to our folks who have been kidnapped from us and like trying to find ways of continuing to make communion with them is going to be very important as well. Folks, the folks that put us in touch actually are folks that have been doing that kind of work, fighting for the J20 protesters and fighting for Katie Yao's case, and have been doing a lot of awesome stuff here to just stay in touch with organizers from years back that are still held inside, and emphasizing that. But just you can join any kind of group anywhere that you are, like take a stand wherever you are, and that's going to look very differently. But understanding that like the horizon is open and that we have not lost the future. It's usually when we're celebrating that these moments of intense violence happen, as in Charlottesville, right? Like that was our victory march. And that's when that murderer decided to drive his car through us. But it was our victory in holding on to the fact that we are strong and we are persistent. We're going to keep dreaming. And even when we are exhausted, we are not one. We are legion, and we will keep reincarnating until this work doesn't require us to do that or require something else from our existence. Also, yeah, check out Yarimar's work. She's a really cool anthropologist. Deborah Thomas is also like a really awesome person that's been doing really awesome archival work around what it means to confront violence. These are, intellectuals, that are also trying to do other kinds of things. I think I'm sure folks have heard of George Cisarriello Mayer, who, infamously tweeted in December about, a white genocide, etc. But there are different kinds of avenues for being able to carry this forward. And it's going to be from writing to cooking to just dreaming. We need it all. And I think we got it. It's just a matter of continuing to nourish it.
Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me on the show. And I really appreciated your thoughts and perspective and your analysis of the situation. And yeah.
Thank you so much for the time and space.
Thank you so much, Jose, for coming onto the show and for making time. And it's been a real pleasure to talk to you for the radio.
Absolutely. And I hope that, folks that hear this, and yourself included, that we can continue to stay in touch. And even if I haven't met you yet, I hope to in this lifetime or in another one, because we're out here and we're going to keep doing this. So thank you for making a platform for us to make this communion happen. And, onward, we got it.
The interviewees recommended getting in touch with regional organizations for solidarity and resources where possible. CIMA operates out of Asheville and stands for Compañeros Inmigrantes de las Montañas en Acción, which is a, quote, regional network connecting and strengthening organizations that empower Latino communities in Western North Carolina. At one point, about 25 organizations actively participated in the coalition, end quote. You can follow them on the web at cimawnc.org and email them at info@cimawnc.org. Again, you can talk to me about what you thought of this editing process by emailing me, William, at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. What you're about to hear is Las Otras with Burócratas, which is one of my favorites. They are an anarcho-feminist punk hardcore band from Barcelona, and they released this in 2012 off of their self-titled album.